I was a musician at the wedding of someone I'd known since she was 4 years old. Her new mother in law was singing in the wedding. She showed up expecting to be the center of attention and pouted when she was treated like she's no better than anyone else. While at the reception, she'd had enough. While the happy couple had a blast cutting the cake, the mother in law approached me and the pianist to say everyone is paying attention to bride's name and nobody is recognizing that I'm the mother of the groom. I'm gonna go tell her she needs to stop hogging all the attention. As she's turning toward the newlyweds, I say, oh no, they're all paying attention to bride because they feel sorry for her. Everyone knows the most important person here is the mother of the groom. The dingbat bought it and chilled out. Good thing for her, because I decided right there that I would grind this lady into the floor before I let her bully this girl on her wedding day. What is it with mother in laws trying to grab the center of attention on the most important day of their prospective daughter in law? I was a bridesmaid in my friend's wedding. The girlfriend of the groom's cousin showed up late to the very formal wedding, right as the bride started walking down the aisle wearing a tight, short, low cut bandage dress that was white. All of the pictures of the bridge walking down the aisle with her dad have this girl she had never met before standing in the background. The groom's cousin and the girlfriend got totally plastered at the reception. Got in a huge fight because he was aggressively flirting with one of the bartenders in front of her and broke up. At least my friend will always have the wedding pictures to remember her by. So let me get this right. You're gonna show up to a wedding of someone you've never met before, and you're going to break the cardinal sin of wearing white to this wedding, except in the worst possible way to a very formal event. My husband's coworker RSVP'd that he couldn't come because he was going to a USC football game, his alma mater. They were playing my alma mater, and there's a rivalry. USC won. So, the coworker showed up at a reception again, having RSVP'd no, to make fun of me because my alma mater lost, drink free booze in celebration of his win, and say my husband still could find a hotter wife for his second. Sounds like this coworker shouldn't have been invited to begin with. I went to the wedding of my aunt's stepdaughter, and everything was beautiful and going great until it came time for the bride to walk down the aisle. She basically stormed down it, then threw her bouquet at the groom and started screaming and crying. We then found out, in a very dramatic fashion, that the groom had been having an affair with the bride's mother, my aunt, for basically the entirety of their relationship. The groom was not even remotely embarrassed and proceeded to state how he was in love with my aunt, but stayed with my step-cousin because he didn't want to hurt her feelings. The whole affair was very dramatic, and we left soon after the bride stormed out. Fast forward 3 months later, I received a wedding invitation from him and my aunt. Imagine waiting until your wedding day after spending hours planning for an event and probably spending thousands of dollars on a wedding just to let everyone find out that you had been cheating on your wife-to-be with her mother. We had an adult-only reception because some friends and family have used me for a designated babysitter while they party, and this was my special day. I made arrangements for some children to be there, but very few. My horrible stepsister decided to make herself the wedding police and kick them out of my wedding. I had no idea what was going on and figured they couldn't make it. She later loaded food, drinks, presents, and our evening wedding night picnic into her car and left. She called me a month later to tell me she had a horrible time. This just sounds to me like there wasn't good enough communication around that event, because if you're going to mark something adult only and then make some exceptions, it's pretty important for everybody to kind of know about that. We hosted our son's rehearsal dinner at a restaurant near the venue. There were name cards for everyone we invited. 2 relatives of the bride, not in the wedding party, came to the dinner and sat at a nearby table. They not only ordered an expensive meal, but ordered an additional meal for takeout and told the staff to put it on our tab. Not wanting to make a scene, my husband paid for it, but they got an earful from the bride's father. That makes me wonder how they even found out about the event to begin with if they weren't invited to it, but the audacity to show up to an event that you're not invited to, order a super expensive meal to eat there, and then also order an expensive meal to go takes a very special form of entitlement. I was so looking forward to saying my vows after 8 years of dating. Our pastor was more conservative than we were, but we had good conversations about it over the years, and I expected he would be accommodating to our wishes. After my new husband said his vows to love, honor, and cherish, the pastor told me to love, honor, and obey. I freaked out, stammered, and stared at the pastor. Isn't this what having rehearsal is for? Because I definitely remember basically rehearsing our entire wedding ceremony, minus a few bells and whistles. But also, it kind of seems like that pastor overstepped a little bit because if they had known each other well enough, then he would have known that that would have made the bride to be kind of uncomfortable. But maybe communication wasn't very strong in this case either. I was a very close friend of the bride, and one of a few that remained single. When it came time to throw the bouquet, she made a point of standing in front of me, looking over her shoulder at me and winking. She threw the bouquet, and her recently widowed mother runs from the sidelines, jumps in front of me, and grabs the bouquet. In the end, the bride spoke privately to her mother, wrestled the bouquet away from her, and gave it to me. After that, I was less than enthused to get it. Yeah, that's just a little bit awkward. And I hate to say it's kind of normal for the woman to be like super overly enthusiastic when it comes to the bouquet throwing. Never really understood why, but I'll just leave that to them. At my adults only requested reception, which was politely stated on the invitations, a couple decided to bring their 3 kids anyway. On the RSVP, they never mentioned bringing them, which also threw off the meal count. Rather than get a sitter, and trust me, these people are very wealthy and could afford a sitter, they decided to ignore our request. Not only were these kids running around screaming, throwing food, interrupting speeches and dances, and making a general mess of everything, they decided to pull the fire alarm and the fire department came out. This is just another classic case of entitlement because if you're going to RSVP for an event that very clearly states adults only, no matter how polite it may be, you should not be bringing your kids to that event. Find a way to get a babysitter for them. Because unfortunately, situations like this, where they're causing a huge scene and making a mess and pulling the fire alarm, that is the exact reason why kids often don't get invited to events like this. You only get to have one wedding after all. I was dating someone who was still super close with their high school friends. They were part of the wedding party for the wedding of one of the girls who was first to get married. This bride lucked out. The groom was head over heels in love with her, and so was one of the ushers. During the toast, the usher, who knew the bride since high school, grabbed a hold of the mic and proceeded to slowly and painfully confess his love for the bride in the most awkward toast of the century. The kicker was that not one person at the reception, none of the members of the bridal party, or the wedding planner thought to take the microphone away from this man. That is just painfully awkward. And who decided that it'd be a good idea to appoint this man usher if he was going to have the potential of doing something like this? Early in my wedding photographer career, I was photographing a wedding where the reception was in the bride's parents' backyard. It was summer, and with all of the food laid out, the food was starting to, shall we say, decompose. But the bride and groom had not shown up to the reception. Everyone was getting frustrated, children were hungry but couldn't be fed because the bride and groom weren't there. When they finally did arrive, he was carrying her because she was so drunk. Seems that they had stopped by a bar, and because they were dressed in a tux and wedding dress, they were given free drinks. They proceeded to bar hop for an hour and a half and got served free drinks wherever they went. That's just kind of sad, honestly. Clearly, this bride and groom had no regard for any of the people that they had invited to this very special event. Makes you wonder how that may have affected those relationships later down the road. My sister and I were supposed to be maid of honor and bridesmaids for one of our relatives' wedding. Our mother was diagnosed with cancer. We tried to raise some money as our mom would no longer be able to work. One of us stated we would shave our heads as a tribute to our mother. Well, the bride and the bride's mother went off the rails and stated that the bride wanted nice wedding photos and that if one of us had no hair, the pictures would be ruined. This would also take away from the bride. Never once did they care about why one of us wanted to shave our heads or asked when it was going to happen. We both got kicked out of the wedding party. All of this happened through text message. The bride's parents then asked for the dresses that we paid for so the new bridesmaids could have them. Obviously, very sad story. And I feel like this is one of those situations where communication obviously is very important. And I can't really tell from this whether or not they had already shaved their head before they had sent this text message. At the same time, I do think it is incredibly shallow that the bride to be and her mother would be so put off by the idea of having someone with a shaved head in the wedding photos. And then to not care to ask why, well, that's kind of double sided as well. Communication is key, but that's no excuse to be shallow either. There was an open bar at my brother's wedding, and I wanted to make sure him and his new wife knew how much I cared about their new life. It was probably a booze filled feeling. 7 minutes into a speech, my husband sat me down like someone being played out at the Oscars. So someone got a little bit tipsy and tried to make a wedding speech. That's what I got out of that. This was my own wedding. My husband had picked his best friend from college as his best man for the wedding. His parents were furious that he had not selected one of his brothers and apparently really didn't like the guy. Come wedding day, the best man was supposed to drive us from the church to the reception after the wedding ceremony. The car was filthy. I had to move beer bottles to get in the car, and then he ran out of gas in triple digit temperatures on the highway on the way there. I had to stand in my wedding dress on the side of the highway, sweating away, waiting while he and my husband went walking to the next exit to find a gas station and bring back gas for the car. This was before cell phones. After waiting and nearly fainting from the heat, someone I knew finally drove past about 45 minutes later and took me on to the reception without my husband. It took them 2 hours to find gas and get back to the car. That's just a dumpster fire situation, and somehow I'm starting to understand why they didn't want this person to be the best man. Those were some absolutely crazy wedding stories. Let me know in the comments which one you thought was the craziest, and if you have a story of your own, you know I want to hear about it in the comments.